The Mckinney family home videos come across as less traditional analog horror and more something akin to the Blair Witch Project or other found footage horror films from the late 90s and early 2000s. As of the time of this writing, the full series consists of 16 separate uploads, and their YouTube channel boasts over 5,000 subscribers. Doing much better than me, I see. There's not much to be found in the description section of the video. In fact, the entire section consists of just a single phrase. "My son, what have you done?" Very intriguing stuff. I don't know about you, but this series definitely has my curiosity piqued. And so, if you love analog horror just as much as I do, and want me to keep covering them on this channel, then hit those like and subscribe buttons. And finally, with all that being said, let's dive back into the muck. The very first tape in the series is titled Move In 1991. Out of all the entries in this series, this one has received the most exposure, with it currently sitting at 23,000 views. Not too shabby at all, really. I'm truly glad that these lesser-known analog horror series are finally receiving the recognition that they so deserve. I mean, so much care and effort goes into the creation of these series. It's truly impressive stuff. I certainly couldn't do it. So if you have yet to watch this full series, then please go do that now, and only come back to this video after the fact. Let's show this series some love, people. Anyway, the first tape opens up in September of the year 1991, with a family who finally seems to be moving into their new home. I say finally because it appears that the whole move has been a bit of a stressful process. As anyone who has ever tried to move an entire family can attest, it is certainly no easy task. Whoever is holding the camera decides to conduct a tour of the exterior of the new house, and almost immediately he notices something strange.
That's weird.
It seems to be the screen for a window or a door lying on the ground next to the home. And that's not the only strange thing that we notice either. As the cameraman moves around to the front of the dwelling, he notices that it appears as though the front doorbell has been forcibly removed from the siding of the house at some point in the past.
I'll add it to the list of things that need to be taken care of before the kids get here.
Interesting. Soon, the impromptu tour continues on to the interior of the home. As we progress through the house, we're treated to a few brief glimpses of Halloween decorations.
Look at this. We have the haunted fun house. We got the pumpkins. We've got this guy. We got the blackout diner cafe thing.
And a couple of sparsely furnished bedrooms, before we eventually arrive at the top of a stairway leading down to the quite creepy looking basement.
Not fully decided yet. I don't know if we're going to want the kids down here. It's a little dingy. There's some mold. We're having a guy come in and get that taken care of, but
due to the steepness of the basement stairs and the fact that it appears to have no working electricity, the cameraman seems reluctant to ever allow the children to venture down there. And from this one innocuous statement, we're able to surmise that this particular family consists of at least 2 children, if not more. However, it appears that the rest of the family has yet to arrive to their new home. From the various things that he said throughout this DIY house tour, I think it's fairly safe to say that our brave, intrepid cameraman is actually the father of the family. Once down in the basement, Dad points out some stuff that's been left behind by the previous occupants of the home. And it isn't long before Dad notices what seems to be a wedding picture left behind on a desk.
Look at this. You see that? Check this out.
Which is something that's important enough. You would think the previous occupants would have taken it with them. Judging from some of the things that the father has been saying, it seems to be the case that he and his wife have been going through a bit of a rough patch in their relationship recently.
Love it. I think that Jess and I really just need to start over.
And this whole move just might be a desperate attempt in order to save their marriage. If you're already going through a tough time in your relationship, then I personally wouldn't really recommend adding the stress of moving house on top of all that. But hey, that's just me. Back to the tour, and the dad is interrupted by the ringing of a home telephone. Remember those? As the dad goes off to answer it, he sets the camera down facing the old wedding photo. As the conversation takes place in the background, the contrast of the screen slowly grows more and more red. Meanwhile, the conversation, in and of itself, comes across as pretty strange.
We're new in town, we don't really know anybody, so it was nice. Yeah, we don't necessarily consider ourselves as...
It's unclear who exactly Dad is actually speaking to, but he begins to answer a series of questions that bring up the topic of his mother, and she sounds, well, odd at best. Dad also mentions his religious upbringing and his mother's quote-unquote rules, whatever that means. In my experience, these kind of overbearing parental relationships rarely result in anything good. And this mysterious phone conversation brings us to the end of our first tape. So far, so intriguing. Nothing too out of the ordinary yet, though. So we've just got to press on and see when exactly things start to get strange. The second tape in this hidden gem of an analog horror series is titled Bible Study 1996. And right from the jump, I'm feeling a bit confused, because there isn't a single church to be seen anywhere. Some Bible study, huh? Instead, this tape opens at what seems to be some kind of rural-looking farmstead. The camera then pans over to show a beautiful woman who is dressed in black. Could this perhaps be the spouse of none other than our brave, intrepid cameraman from the first tape? It's possible, I suppose. However, that notion is almost immediately dispelled as the tape then jump cuts to a black and white missing persons poster of who appears to be the very same young woman. At least I hope our brave hero's wife hasn't somehow gone missing. I guess we'll just have to press on in order to find out. The missing poster contains all of the usual information that you would expect it to. Height, weight, hair color, eye color, age, etc., etc. You get the picture. However, one detail in particular that we need to take note of is the fact that the missing woman apparently has a tattoo of a cross on her left wrist. I'm not really sure how exactly that seemingly minute detail is significant yet, but I have a strong feeling that it indeed is. The tape then cuts to a group of people walking along the street at night. Could this possibly be the very same family from the first tape? Well, I guess we'll find out. Suddenly, however, the camera goes dark, and in the background we can hear the unsettling sound of screaming. The question of where exactly we currently are is then answered, as the camera shows the face of a large gravestone. Clearly, we're in a cemetery. Spooky stuff. Before we can progress much further, though, the camera then cuts to yet another missing persons poster. Once again, the missing person is a woman. And once again, the poster states that she has a tattoo of a cross on her left wrist. What could this possibly mean? Is it simply a sign of religious ties? Or perhaps it's the calling card of a cult of some kind. Those are just a couple of my probably bad guesses. We simply do not yet have enough information to be able to discern what's really going on here. At the very least, though, there's a definite and discernible pattern that's starting to take shape. However, the detail of the tattoo isn't the only strange thing about this particular missing poster. The eyes of the woman in the photo resemble two black voids, and where the poster would normally provide their color, it simply lists them as missing. The scene we cut to next is so dark that it's quite difficult to even tell what's really going on, but it appears to be a shot of two people interacting in some fashion in front of a gravestone. I'm sorry that I can't be more precise here, but the scene is just that dark. The tape then glitches out before returning facing yet another grave. This is getting truly creepy, folks. For only a moment, we can hear people talking and perhaps even laughing in the background, before the tape then cuts to another missing poster. I'm starting to sound like a broken record here. However, this poster appears even more strange than the previous two. For example, the section where it should describe what kind of clothing the missing woman was wearing, it reads simply, "shame." And ominously, once again, this woman is said to have had a tattoo of a cross on her left wrist. Could all of these missing women perhaps be members of the same Mckinney family? Or maybe the so-called Mckinney family isn't actually a family in the traditional sense at all, but instead something much more akin to a cult. These are the kind of thoughts tumbling around in my head as we press on. The tape then cuts to a dark shot of many, many graves. I counted 23 personally. Not that it really matters. Or at least I don't think it does. After a moment, white text begins to appear on the screen. "We trusted you," it reads, but then continues with the words, "Heaven is not yours." The screen then suddenly flashes to a deep blood-red and distorted-looking missing poster, where the text is quite difficult to even make out. For whatever reason, this image happens to be especially unsettling. The tape then cuts for a final time to the exterior of what seems to be a small church. White text then comes across the screen, which reads, "You are not welcome here." Keep in mind now, as we already learned from the first tape, the mother of our intrepid family father and once cameraman has deep and strong religious ties in her background. So could she somehow be involved in whatever is happening here? And for that matter, what is happening here exactly? I think it's just too early to say. And this uncertainty brings us to the end of tape 2. The third tape in this ongoing series is fittingly titled Third Grade Graduation 1994. Considering the title, the building we're currently looking at is most likely some kind of a school, and it isn't long before whoever's holding the camera makes their way inside. The interior of the building would lead me to believe that this is some kind of religious school, which fits in well with the ongoing themes of the overall series so far. As the camera films the interior of the school, going from room to room, occasionally you can make out some barely audible snatches of conversation in the background. However, there isn't a single person to be seen anywhere. Perhaps everyone is at the graduation referenced in the title of the video. Who knows? Eventually, though, our camera person makes their way to the library, and as they're walking along the aisles filming, the sounds of books falling off a shelf can clearly be heard. A haunted library, perhaps? This stops the person filming in their tracks before the screen goes black, and once again, white text appears. "It wasn't here," the text reads. The tape then glitches out one more time before more text appears that reads, "I begged you." The tape then cuts to a far darker shot, and we get yet more text which reads, "Please not here," whatever that means. I know this has already been referenced in a few other videos that have been made by creators on this series, but it's at this point where the tape goes full Skinamarink mode. I mean, just look at some of these shots. And throughout this creepiness, we're confronted with even more text. If you pick up, the devil will answer, it reads. Quite the ominous message. Phone calls in general seem to be an ongoing theme of this series. Could that have been the devil himself that our cameraman was speaking to on the phone back in the first tape? I mean, telemarketers are kind of the devil, aren't they? The next portion of the tape is by far the most disturbing of any we've seen so far. The sound of a child crying can be heard in the background, along with muffled sounding thumps from some heavy object. I got the impression that someone might have been burying a child alive. Wow, that's quite the awful thought. As a father myself, I truly wish that I'm wrong here. However, whatever those sounds were, I think it's fairly safe to say that they weren't anything good. The final shot of the tape is what appears to be the back of a row of houses. White text then pops up on the screen, which reads, "I won't come home again, but only you know why." This text makes me think even further that a child was indeed harmed in those previous clips, and I'm still getting the vibe that a cult is involved in all of this somehow. But anyway, that brings us to the end of tape 3. The fourth tape in this series is titled Grandma's House 1995. What a wholesome title. Just FYI, I would have been 5 years old when this tape apparently took place. Shit, I'm old. This tape opens up with a shot of a creepy looking old house. Based on the title, I would think that most likely this is Grandma's house. And that's exactly the kind of lightning quick analysis that you came here for, isn't it? Unlike the previous tapes, however, the camera doesn't move in to explore this house. Instead, we're treated to a kind of slideshow of increasingly creepy images. And things certainly don't get any less creepy when we're once again met with white text that reads, "The screaming, it never stops." Well, that's quite unsettling. And speaking of unsettling, the slideshow of images we're being treated to only continues to grow more and more disturbing in nature. Within some of these images, the home seems to be in such disarray that it appears that a bomb might have been set off inside at some point in the past. That's a joke, of course, but still, it's pretty messy, folks. Suddenly, we hear what sounds like rocks being thrown at the side of the house and its windows. Sure enough, we're soon greeted with the sound of a window being smashed out. Who in the world would even want to break into this decrepit, creepy old house? Personally, it's not really a place that I'd be dying to spend much time in. But hey, that's just me. Set over a photo of an old kitchen table is white text that reads, "This is my body. This is my blood." Could some kind of a cultish sacrifice have possibly taken place here once upon a time? It's not enough, further text reads. The tape then ends in extremely ominous fashion, with a dark, red-hued shot of the house set over distorted audio. Here, see for yourselves. Soon, the text, "I was never enough," appears over this image. Personally, I found this to be the most unsettling entry in the entire series so far, and I am now 90% certain that old Grandma was definitely up to no good. So let's press on to the next tape and see if we can decipher any more clues. The fifth tape in this series is titled Christy Baptism 1993. So I guess we're going back in time a couple of years here. And remember, back in the first tape, the father mentioned that his daughter was named Christy. But I gotta be honest here, this tape has led me to question every single theory that I've formulated about this series so far. The tape opens in a vehicle, zooming down a dark highway at night. The description for this video reads simply, "My children are missing." And so I'd imagine that we're currently out on the hunt for them. I can't even imagine how I'd react if my daughter went missing. I'd be absolutely frantic. Before we transition to our next shot, there's a quick flash of a dark image of some kind. A drawing, perhaps? The next shot is of a Toyota truck that's been pulled off to the side of the road with its hazard lights on. Do you think that this is our vehicle or someone else's? I'm guessing that it's our own vehicle because the next few shots are of the camera person walking down the side of the road, which you do when your car breaks down. Eventually, they make it to the forest and ultimately wind up at an abandoned church that looks to be the very same church from the end of the second tape. Remember that one? However, in no way does this place resemble the cute little building from that video. Here, the church is abandoned and completely decrepit. After exploring the interior of the church for a bit, a sudden loud noise coming from outside causes our camera person to freeze in their tracks. We then see white text appear over an image of the broken window, which reads, "Who is there?" Some further exploring follows this, before we see the text, "I can't talk to strangers." Could this possibly be some kind of paranormal entity, the ghost of a child perhaps, attempting to communicate in some fashion with our brave camera person? Or am I just way off base here? This statement is then followed with another question. "Where are we going?" it reads. Could this possibly be the ghost of a murdered child trying their best to reach out? After all, the entity says that he can't talk to strangers, which is a phrase that is most often repeated by children. We then witness another strange, dark image that is almost impossible to decipher. Perhaps these are all children's drawings of some kind. It's really quite difficult to say for sure though. Once again, a still image of the window then appears, before a ghostly figure of some kind can be seen out in the darkness, and the chilling words, "He's hurting me," comes across the bottom of the frame. Does this mean that I was wrong, and Grandma isn't the big bad of this series? After all, the ghost, or whatever it is, said, "He's hurting me." However, I'm not quite ready to completely rule Grandma out as a suspect yet. But perhaps she didn't act alone. The camera person then leaves the church, only to come across what appears to be the very same creepy cemetery that group of people were exploring back in the second tape. After the camera moves further into the forest, we're treated to yet more text that reads, "You can hear me. I have been made pure." Once again, I would say that all of the available evidence is pointing towards a cult of some kind sacrificing people, possibly children. In the very next shot, we suddenly hear an extremely strange sound. It sounds like nothing less than a child crying out in distress. I have to say, this is definitely the most downright scary entry into the series so far. I don't know about you, but I, for one, am thoroughly creeped out. Our camera person reacts in shock and fear to the haunting sound of a child crying out, and he immediately begins running in the opposite direction, before the screen cuts to black and more white text appears. "I have seen God," it reads, before continuing with the words, "I want to go home." And this ominous message brings us to the end of the 5th tape. And I just gotta say, this entry was a complete game changer, people. However, I remain convinced that this is all the evil work of some kind of demonic, child-killing cult. What I am not sure of, though, is whether or not the Mckinney family is just a normal family who somehow got caught up in all of this madness. Or, on the other hand, if the Mckinney family is actually the name of the cult itself. I'm guessing that at some point in the year 1993, these children went missing. And now our camera person is trying to find them, or at the very least, trying to figure out what exactly happened. And who is attempting to communicate through all of this creepy white text? Could it be the spirits of sacrificed children, perhaps? This is where the video will end. However, do not despair, because part 2 will be coming very soon. Overall, the Mckinney Family Home Videos is one of my favorite analog horror series of all time, at least so far. And that's really saying something, folks, because I've consumed a metric ton of analog horror over the last 12 or so months. Seriously, it's becoming kind of an addiction, people. Send help immediately. The channel itself has done everything that it can in order to make it the most authentic experience possible. You see, they don't upload these tapes under the guise of an analog horror series. They upload them as though they're the Mckinney family themselves. And who knows, maybe they are. At least for me, this approach makes each and every tape feel that much more visceral, immediate, and ultimately frightening. And keep in mind now, I'm watching these tapes along with you in real time. Or I don't know, maybe you've already seen every available video front to back numerous times, but that certainly isn't the case for me. I'm watching each of these tapes for the very first time as I'm making these videos covering them. And so, you're getting my real, unfiltered, and visceral reaction to every single creepy-ass thing that I'm seeing. Personally, I feel that this helps everything to feel more authentic. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, there are currently 16 separate Mckinney tapes which have been released so far. And so, that number guarantees that there will be at least 4 of these videos covering them, since we're covering 5 tapes per video. However, in all likelihood, there will probably be far more. Before you watch those videos, though, I want you to go watch every tape of the series so far. Let's boost all those numbers, people, because they truly deserve it. You see, the Mckinney Family Home Videos is an ongoing series, which means that it isn't finished yet. In fact, new tapes are being released to this very day. And to that I say, lucky us. And you had better believe that Cancel Happiness will be there to cover them all along the way. Welcome back, everyone. It's good to be here with you all. It's been a minute. What appears to be just wholesome family home videos from the 90s is, in all reality, a terrifying analog horror series the likes of which I have rarely seen. And that's really saying something, because I've consumed a lot of analog horror over the years. The Mckinney Family Home Videos appear to hold terrifying secrets concerning missing and possibly murdered children, as well as the likely involvement of some kind of demonic cult. This series had me hooked right from the jump, people. I mean, what else could you possibly want in an analog horror series? While we haven't received any real answers as of yet, it appears that the majority of the Mckinney family have somehow gone missing. Everyone except the father, that is. And Dad is now on a mission to track down his missing loved ones. Or at least that's my personal take on events. I also believe that some kind of demonic cult has been very busy sacrificing children, including the children of the Mckinney family. I could be dead wrong, of course, but as of the ending of the last tape that we covered, the 5th tape, that's where things stand for me. And so we'll pick back up right where we left off with the 6th tape. However, if you have yet to watch the Mckinney family home videos for yourself, then I highly recommend that you go do that first and only return to this video after the fact. It's very important that we support these series, people, so a link will be in the description below. Oh, and just one more quick thing before we get started. I'm convinced that the grandmother of the family in question is involved in all of these disappearances in some fashion. I just can't prove it yet. Hopefully, the next 5 tapes will finally begin to provide us with some concrete answers. And so, if you love analog horror just as much as I do, and want to see me cover more of it on this channel, then hit those like and subscribe buttons. And finally, with all that being said, it's time to dive back into the muck. The 6th tape in the ongoing Mckinney family home videos is titled Scaremare 1995. Quite the interesting title. I wonder what exactly it means. Our tape then opens in what appears to be the basement or garage of what I'm guessing is the Mckinney family homestead itself. The tape then glitches out for a moment, only to return in the middle of what seems to be some kind of homemade haunted house. DIY scares, huh? I love it. It's quite ironic, though, that the Mckinney family would create their own haunted house within a home that is in all likelihood actually haunted. I mean, that's a lot of ghostly action, people. Ghost squared, if you will. Who you gonna call? A large chunk of this tape is just the camera person exploring this haunted house, which, don't get me wrong, is very interesting stuff indeed. It's not long, however, before our tape once again cuts out, and we're met with a very dark and unsettling image. At first, the image is just too dark to even make out, but if you brighten the resolution just a bit, you quickly see that it's actually a photo of a doll. One that appears to have been cut or torn up. We're then faced with the first creepy, white text of this tape. "You're about to be born. Are you prepared?" it reads. The tape then cuts to another unsettling image of a doll, and I just gotta say, I really don't like this one, folks. I mean, just look at its freaking eyes. The fitting text, "What did you see?" then flashes across the screen. I saw a creepy-ass doll, thank you very much. Following these horrific images, we're suddenly back to exploring the DIY haunted house. However, this time it's much darker inside. I don't want to read too much into that, though. It is a haunted house, after all. Aren't they supposed to be dark? Or perhaps the haunted house is just over now, and we're only seeing the cleanup. The tape then cuts to another image of a doll, and we get more text that reads, "You made me an angel. You are the devil." The tape then ends with a shot of a skeleton or Grim Reaper decoration. No real answers yet, but plenty of new questions. Questions such as, who exactly is communicating through all of this white text? Could it be the slain and sacrificed Mckinney children themselves? And if so, who exactly are they addressing? If we assume that the father is still the one behind the camera, and the children are attempting to speak to him, does that mean that he was involved in their deaths in some fashion? As a father myself, I truly hope that isn't the case, but I highly doubt that little old grandma was acting alone. She might have been the ringleader of the whole circus, but she'd still need someone to carry out the more physical aspects of her crimes. Very interesting stuff. So let's press on and see what else we can find out in the next tape. The 7th entry in the series is titled Jessica Homecoming 1998. I highly doubt that the dates in this series really matter all that much. After all, up till this point, we've been jumping all over the calendar. However, if this date is to be trusted, that puts us well in front of the timeline. And this tape is the closest set to present day. At least so far. The tape opens on a shot of trees and sky. It would actually be quite idyllic if it weren't for the demonic sounding voice speaking over the footage. Here, listen for yourselves. Most of the speech is fairly audible, and the whole thing comes across as quite threatening. The tape then glitches out, only to return in the forest. Our ultimate destination, though, appears to be the Mckinney family home. We're then shown an image of the house, with its windows lit up with an eerie red light. Following this, the camera returns to the interior of the home. I believe that this is the first time we've seen inside the main house since way back in the first tape. Other than the basement, that is. Soon we're met with more creepy white text. Do you see it? It reads. Do you hear it? The text then continues with the question, was it worth it? We then receive what's probably the most ominous message of the series so far. They're rotting, and it's your fault, it says. The screed continues with, vile blasphemer, hollow apologies. What will you do? Can you forgive yourself? Wow, that was a whole speech, people. I think this ghost might be running for office. While the text was on screen, you could also hear a male voice whispering in the background. Just listen. Following this, we're met with a few blood-curdling screams. The tape then cuts back to the interior of the basement. Judging by the sounds coming from above, it would seem that our camera person is not alone in the home. We're met with a door leading to another room before we're shown a truly frightening portion of the tape. The text, God will never forgive, then flashes across the screen. Suddenly, we're back outside in the daylight, looking at the back of a dark-haired woman, who I can only assume is Jessica herself. And this person appears to be the exact same woman who was shown briefly in the second tape. Suddenly, it's nighttime again, and we hear what sounds like something being dragged across the ground. A body, perhaps? Creepy old music begins to play, as we hear some very strange sounds. Personally, I don't even want to try and guess what they could be. Nothing good, I'm sure. Listen. And this brings us to the end of the 7th tape. Did we just witness Jessica's murder? I don't know what other possible conclusion you could glean from the segment we just saw. This tape caused me to rethink a lot of my theories. For one, I don't think that the missing posters we were shown in the second tape were actually of the Mckinney family themselves. I could be wrong, of course, but the looks just aren't matching up. Second, I'm now convinced that Dad is involved in all of this in some way. I mean, assuming he's still the one behind the camera, he just has to be involved. But let's press on and try to find some more answers. The 8th entry into this series is titled simply Blank. Ironically, considering its nondescript title, this entry might just be the most important in the entire series so far. This tape opens with what seems to be a back and forth conversation between the strange white text and what others have theorized is possibly a child from the Mckinney family itself. The text comes at us very quickly through here, so please try and bear with me. Tell me about your family, the text commands. Why not? It then asks, before further questioning. Do you have friends? Show me, it orders. As you can clearly see, we're only privy to one side of this potentially paranormal conversation. At least so far. However, it isn't too difficult for us to fill in the blanks. Eventually, though, the screen cuts to a static shot of a children's drawing. And set over this drawing is where we see the other side to that previous conversation. This is where I'm from, the text reads. These are my friends, it says. And then quite ominously, for only a moment, the text switches and it instead reads, these were my friends. We then receive yet more text, which is set over some much darker and more disturbing drawings. This is Dwayne. This is Mommy. This is me. Grandma, it says. Played over the images of these drawings is the quite distressing sound of a woman sobbing. And then, set over the drawing that reads, this is me, is the sound of someone beating upon a door or wall. The tape then ends with the creepy statement, Mommy will make it better. Now, I'll just go ahead and say what we're all thinking here. Who in the hell is Dwayne? Is The Rock involved in all of this somehow? Honestly, I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, have you seen Red One? Absolutely diabolical work. Anyway, that name Dwayne set my spidey senses to tingling, and I remembered something that I'd overlooked previously. At the end of the tape, which was titled Christy Baptism, we were met with this image. Now, it's tough to fully decipher, but the name Dwayne can be made out easily enough. So, is Dwayne the father of the family? And if that is the case, then why refer to him by his first name and not Dad or Daddy? Could this possibly mean that Mr. Mckinney is actually the stepfather to these children? If that is the case, then it raises a whole host of new questions. So let's press on and try to find out. The 9th tape in this series is titled Family Vacation 1990. Hey, that was the year I was born. Yeah, I know. I'm old as shit. You don't have to rub it in. The tape opens up with a shot of a pigeon. Okay, well that's hella random. It seems that the recording of this idyllic family vacation has been taped over at some point, because at various intervals throughout its runtime, it cuts back to the Mckinney family home. The camera person explores the house for a bit before zooming in on a nearby door, for some reason. After a moment, however, our creepy white text makes its triumphant return. I can help you, it reads. I can save you. Following this, though, the tape then cuts right back to our vacation footage. It appears that we're currently on some kind of museum tour that ironically is covering the bloody history of the Salem witch trials of all things. However, we're not on this tour for long before the haunting text returns. The only way out is to burn, it says. And throughout the full remainder of this tape, we go back and forth between more of this text and the ironic museum tour. I mean, could witches be involved in all of this somehow? I doubt it, but I certainly can't rule it out yet. It is not enough to burn. Make them suffer, the text then reads. The camera then cuts to the interior of some bizarre-looking building before we receive yet more text. You lied, it reads, before the tape cuts to an extremely dark scene. And within this darkness, we can hear a male voice pleading out for help. The camera then cuts to the exterior of a house, and we're met with this. Hell is open, it says. You are not you anymore. Heaven is weeping. Following this, we're greeted with some very dark and disturbing images. I can't tell if the bodies we're seeing are actually real, or if they're just leftover decorations from the previous haunted house. We then flash back to the museum tour for just a moment before we're met with more text. The devil saw everything, it informs us. We then cut to a shot of the Mckinney family on a passenger train, either leaving or arriving to their vacation. Very creepily, however, the shot of Jessica on the train then distorts, and we receive more text. Please come home, it reads. This leaves us with the obvious question. Where in the hell is Jessica? And what exactly happened to her? That's the million-dollar question, folks. Just mark my words. You heard it here first. And this eerie inquiry brings us to the end of our 9th tape. I have a feeling that something quite horrible befell our poor Jessica. So let's press on to see if we can discover the truth together. I don't know about you, but I, for one, am thoroughly freaked out by now. The 10th entry into this truly frightening analog horror series is titled Dwayne Hunting Trip 1997. Uh-oh, The Rock's back at it again, folks. The tape opens up in what looks to be a cold and dark forest. As we stare upwards at the sky and trees, we hear what sounds like a man groaning in some kind of discomfort. We're then met with our very first text of the tape. The Holy Mother approaches, it warns us. The tape then cuts to the camera person trudging through the snowy, frozen forest before arriving at a closed gate. And upon this gate there is hung a no trespassing sign. It's as plain as day. However, it appears that our camera person pays no heed at all to this warning. And once on the other side, they come across a beautiful snow angel. The scene appears quite idyllic and serene at first, but once the tape switches to a static image, we can see bright red blood splattered all over the ground. Be not afraid, our text then reads. Well, that's easier said than done, thank you very much. Following this, our camera person continues their trek through the snow. Despite its haunting beauty, the snowy forest at night presents quite the unsettling atmosphere. It isn't long, though, before we're met with more text. Lilith is coming, it informs us. Do you remember now? It inquires. Personally, the only Lilith that I'm familiar with is the one from the fantastic television show Supernatural. On that show, Lilith was a demon. The very first demon, in fact. However, within theology, I believe that Lilith was the first wife of Adam, who ultimately was banished forever from the Garden of Eden. So, could demons be involved in all of this somehow? It's certainly beginning to look more and more likely, isn't it? As the camera person continues moving through the forest, he comes across more splashes of blood upon the ground. And I believe that this next scene finally reveals who exactly is behind the camera. Suddenly, we hear what sounds like a disembodied woman's voice call out Dwayne's name from somewhere in the surrounding darkness. And I believe that this finally confirms that Dwayne, the stepfather, and Mr. Mckinney are all one and the same. We're then met with yet more text that reads, "You followed me." And the text only continues with, "You prayed to me. You gave your life to me. But you left your faith. You were punished by me. Your mother brought you home." Wow, I think that just might be the most text we've ever received. And it isn't even over yet. As our camera person, aka Dwayne, reaches some kind of bloody gate, we're met with even more. "And you paid for treason," it says. "All must die, so that I may live." The camera then cuts to the interior of some kind of shed or small shack in the woods. Dwayne explores this place for a bit before we witness this creepy scene.
Daddy?
Over this terrifying image, we then receive even more text. "You have disappointed me," it says. "Your mother is ashamed. Why do you reject me when I am your God?" Suddenly, the strange figure that we're seeing violently lunges forward before the tape once again glitches out. However, it isn't over yet, as we receive more creepy text. "You and your family have always belonged to me," it reads. "My will is done. Your debt is paid. Now leave this place and never return, because if you do, I will devour you. Your body and mind are yours once again." The camera then cuts to Dwayne sprinting through the snowy forest, and the tape then ends with another glitch out and text that reads, "Goodbye, Dwayne." Wow, that's all I can say. There's so much new information to digest here that it's quite difficult to even know where to begin. I think it's safe to say that the name Lilith confirms some kind of demonic involvement in all of this. As of right now, at the end of the 10th tape, my best guess is that the stepfather Dwayne made some kind of deal with a demonic entity, which resulted in the deaths of his entire family, and he is now being haunted by their spirits. Keep in mind though, this is only my best guess. I could be dead wrong about literally everything, of course, but for me, that's where things stand as of the end of the 10th tape. There's still many more questions that need answers though, and so, in my third and final video on this series, I'll be covering all of the remaining Mckinney tapes, and I really hope to see you all there. We made it, people. By the end of this video, we will have witnessed the conclusion to the terrifying Mckinney family home videos. So what will happen? Who will survive? Will Dwayne, the stepfather, face justice for selling his whole family to the demon Lilith? Or at least that's what I believe could have happened here. Perhaps I'll be proven dead wrong by the end of these tapes. I guess we'll see. Remember though, if you have yet to watch the Mckinney family home videos for yourself, then go do that now, and only return to this video after the fact. If we want to see more of them continue to be made, then it's important that we support these analog horror series, people. So go show this series some love. Anyway, with all that being said, it's time to get into it. So let's dive back into the muck. The 11th tape in this ongoing series is titled COTHM, Belief in Community, 1989. COTHM stands for Church of the Holy Mother. The opening shot of this tape informs us that it's going to be a promotional video for this church. As you can see, this tape was created by someone named Diana Mckinney. Now, I'm not positive who Diana is within the Mckinney family, but all signs are pointing towards the grandmother. Over a nice-looking blue background, we're soon met with text that ask, Do you feel lost? Are the pressures of the world becoming too much? Do you just need someone to talk to? Have you tried church? Personally, I've never been a very religious person. However, church can certainly be a great way for you to become more involved in your community. Just not this church, though. I'm pretty sure that this one is plain evil. Back to the tape, and the text only continues its pitch to get you to join the congregation. The Church of the Holy Mother is here to help, it says. We are a local community of believers in God, His angels, and their divine power. Well, okay then. Sounds a bit kooky to me. However, the tape continues with even more text. Though Lucifer took 1/3 of the angels with him when he was cast out of heaven, the Church of the Holy Mother believes that not all of these angels received damnation. Okay, I think we've officially reached crazy levels here, folks. The text continues with, our community believes that Lilith, the first wife of Adam, was spared from damnation and has been given a unique communication between heaven and hell. That's some heavy stuff. Following all of this, the tape suddenly takes a very dark turn, both literally and figuratively. We get a dark and frightening image, with text set over it in the same style we've been seeing in all the previous tapes. You will follow me, it proclaims. However, following this brief shot, we return to the church tape and even more of their sermon. Lilith is a gift from God, it says. Through her, we are able to communicate with loved ones who are near to us and those who are no longer with us. Do you wish to meet the Holy Mother and grow closer to God? The text inquires of the viewer. The tape continues with, then why not visit us this Sunday? We are located on Possum Creek in Rustburg, Virginia. You can also call our prayer hotline at... However, at this moment, the tape cuts out once again, and over a blue screen, we receive more of the creepy text that reads, what do you have to lose? Immediately after this, we cut to a very dark scene. They will follow me, the text reads, and this brings us to the end of our 11th tape. It's obvious to me that this so-called church is really more of a cult, one who worships the biblical figure of Lilith. And we now know where these events are taking place, somewhere near Rustburg, Virginia. It seems that after moving there to be closer to her, Dwayne was influenced by his mother to join this demonic cult. What I'm not sure of, though, is whether or not my previous theory is still valid. Did Dwayne betray his family and sell them to the demon Lilith? Or did something entirely different happen here? Perhaps Dwayne joined this cult, only to eventually realize that he was in over his head. Perhaps he attempted to flee, and he was punished for that with the murder of his entire family. Once again, these are all just my own personal theories. They could be completely wrong, so let's just proceed with caution. The 12th tape in this terrifying horror series is titled COTHM Welcome Home 1991. And as you already know from the last tape, COTHM stands for the Church of the Holy Mother. Sounds pretty nice, right? Well, in this case, not really, as I'm pretty sure that the term Holy Mother, referenced within the title, actually refers to the demon lord Lilith. I mean, I personally wouldn't want her to be my mommy. Okay, that came out kind of strange. My bad, folks. Anyway, it's actually the other section of the title that has me the most interested. That welcome home part, specifically. Who exactly are we welcoming home here? Is this just another reference to the demonic Lilith? Or could this instead signal the imminent return of Jessica herself? Perhaps she isn't actually dead after all. Well, I guess there's only one way to find out, so let's get into it, shall we? The tape opens with another title card, and once again, the name Diana Mckinney is involved. However, instead of the created by designation we received previously, this time it's archived by Diana Mckinney. I wonder what that means exactly. Following the title card, we're met with a shot of what looks to be a trap door leading up to an attic of some sort. Are we back within the Mckinney home itself? Or is this perhaps an entirely new location that we'd never seen before? Personally, my money's on the latter. After a moment, the camera moves up into the dark depths of the attic itself. Spooky stuff. If you've ever seen a horror movie before, then you know that this is prime jump scare territory. I happen to hate jump scares myself, by the way. It seems like they get me every single time. For a bit, there's not too much to see, as the camera just pans around the attic. Everything looks fairly ordinary so far, but as we're being shown some kind of pipes or tubing, the camera suddenly cuts to black, and we're met with the first creepy text of this tape. "Bless this home," it says, "and give your family peace. They're all waiting for you." Once again, I'm forced to conclude that this ominous message is meant for Dwayne. After all, as far as we know, he's still the man behind the camera. Dwayne, what have you been up to, you naughty boy? Following the black screen and creepy text, the camera cuts back to the eerie attic, with yet more shots of tubing of some sort. However, it isn't long before we start hearing raised voices that I can only assume are coming from downstairs, as well as being shown blood smeared on a nearby post. I also feel the need to point out that Dwayne's breathing from behind the camera is now coming very loud and fast, almost as though he's extremely frightened of something. Could he actually be hiding up in the attic, perhaps? From someone or something? In the following shot, it appears that Dwayne himself might be the one who is injured and bleeding. However, as Dwayne sets something down next to his own bloody handprint, I'm starting to wonder if this could possibly be some kind of obscure demonic ritual that we're seeing. Shockingly, it appears as though Dwayne is actually cutting himself with razor blades for some unknown reason. In fact, it's quite difficult to watch. There are strange markings on the paper underneath Dwayne's bloody hand that are only barely visible. As all this is going on, Dwayne begins making some very concerning noises. Here, listen for yourself. Eventually, though, Dwayne falls silent and begins picking up the bloody razor blades and showing them to the camera, one by one. This is followed with Dwayne whispering in some kind of demonic-sounding language. Could it be Latin, perhaps? You be the judge. The tape then glitches out once again, before we're met with another shot of the trap door leading up to the attic. And over this shot, we receive more text. "I never left," it says. "My family is gone, but she promised. If I do what I'm told, it's your turn. I'm so sorry." Throughout this whole screed, we've also been hearing some very disturbing sounds. Here, listen for yourself. The camera then cuts to an outdoor shot of what appears to be a gate at night, before once again cutting out. Set over a black, static-filled screen, we receive yet more text. "The door will open," it says. "I'm coming home soon." And that brings us to the end of this tape. After that one, I'm truly at a loss, folks. I have no idea what's going on here. It seems obvious that Dwayne, and most likely his mother as well, were involved in some sort of black demonic magic. Perhaps they then used this magic to summon the demon Lilith, which resulted in the deaths of almost the entire Mckinney family. Or perhaps I'm just plain wrong. So let's press on to find out. The 13th tape in this wonderful feel-good family series is titled COTHM, The Walden Family, 1990. Huh? Who in the hell is the Walden family? Are we really introducing new characters this late into the game? I mean, come on, people. Well, I guess we'll see. The tape opens up with a black, staticky screen and another title card from the Church of the Holy Mother. Once again, we see the words, archived by Diana Mckinney. Well, she's certainly been busy, hasn't she? Actually, it seems like she produces more videos than I do. Following the title card, we get a shot of what appears to be a forest, and due to the low resolution, I'm having trouble determining if it's day or night. We can hear birds chirping though, so I'm guessing it's daytime. And the very next shot confirms this, as we see a door with a window of some kind in a wooden building, with sunlight streaming in through it. Or I guess it could be moonlight. I mean, who knows? Maybe they were having a supermoon back in 1990 or something. Suddenly, we begin to hear ominous sounding footsteps. Just listen. It almost sounds as though someone is walking back and forth, nervously pacing perhaps. The next shot is set within a home, with a woman sitting on a couch, speaking to someone off screen. It almost sounds as though the woman on the couch is being interviewed by the woman who is currently off screen, as she's being asked a series of personal questions. Listen.
Just don't think about it. So she had a baby. When did she go home? How long was she in the hospital? So she went in Thursday and they left on Monday.
And now the woman on the couch is speaking about the birth of a child. The next shot we receive is of a plain white wall with a single creepy ass painting on it. I mean, just look at that thing. Like, damn, are all these people devil worshippers or something? The conversation between the two women continues off screen as they lament over what the mother wanted to name the child. Personally, I don't see what's wrong with the name May, but whatever, maybe that's just me. The next shot is once again of the couch, but this time there's a bearded man sitting next to the woman, and the two are discussing the woman's pregnancy. After a moment, the woman begins speaking about the man's, who's apparently named Josh, by the way, strange sleeping patterns over the last week or so. Apparently, he's been waking the woman up at 2 or 3 in the morning in order to inquire about the alarm clock, as well as the lock on the door. It sounds as though the bearded man was worried that someone was going to break in. The camera then cuts to a vehicle driving down a dark highway at night. Eventually, the vehicle slows down and pulls off to the side of the road with its windshield wipers on. Within the silence of the vehicle, we can hear the turn signal or blinkers clicking. The camera then cuts to a very dark shot of the full moon hanging above some nearby mountains. And over this image, we're met with two different things. More of the creepy text, and what sounds like the sound of a shovel digging into the earth. Yes, you do, the text reads. Following this, the camera cuts to a very unsettling image of a female figure draped in all white, and down the front of her gown is what appears to be a copious amount of blood. Over this frightening image, we hear an extremely ominous sound before receiving even more text. Hear my voice, it says. If you do what you're told, you will be reunited. The camera then zooms out a bit and cuts to a shot of what looks to be slightly open doors of a closet somewhere. And over this image, we receive yet more text. Love endures all things, it says. How poetic. The camera then cuts to a shot of a staticky TV. Reminds me of The Ring a bit. And over this disturbing imagery, we can hear what almost sounds like demonic, deranged laughter. Is the Joker nearby, perhaps? Anyway, I'm not exactly sure what to make of the final shot of this tape, so I'll just play it and let you be the judge. And that brings us to the end of our 13th tape. So let's just press on, shall we? Only 4 tapes to go. The 14th tape in this heartwarming romantic comedy series is titled COTHM, The Path to Divination, 1991. Did the Mckinney family attend Hogwarts or something? Professor Trelawney's class, perhaps? I guess we'll see. So let's get to it. Once again, the tape opens with the title card. And once again, this video was archived by Diana Mckinney. I'm still not positive on what that means exactly. Following the title card, the screen cuts to a shot of a beautiful painting of flowers. And over this static shot, we begin to hear a male recorded voice. Listen.
On May 26th, 1991.
And then, for the very first time in this series, we hear the actual voice of Diana Mckinney herself. It appears as though she's going to deliver a sermon on tape for us. She begins with Romans chapter 12, verse 1. It seems as though this sermon will be focusing on just what you can sacrifice for your Lord. However, this eventually morphs into a discussion on free will itself. Diana continues this suspect sermon by questioning the true identity of the Lord himself. Could this possibly be because she instead worships the demon Lilith, and she's now trying to lead others down this deep, dark path? Maybe. Honestly, this tape has probably been my least favorite of the series so far. And so, instead of describing every single little thing that Diana's talking about here, I'm just going to allow her sermon to play out for you now. So listen.
I know you have been told that these thoughts are blasphemous, but I ask you here this morning, this fine, beautiful Sunday morning, what is blasphemous about seeking the truth? What if the God you internally question is not who you believe him to be? I understand the concern, my children, but fear not. For here under this roof we can say for certain that we know the true path to divination. And that path is a road paved in sacrifice. You will lose everything seeking the truth. And once you see that truth, can you accept it? Let me tell you a little story about my life and my own personal walk. I had a child at the young age of 19. The father of my child and my husband at the time was a good man. We were not churchgoers when we first met. No, we were stained in sin, lost in the darkness of youth. In the middle of all this was a child who we loved dearly. When times grew tough, my husband Richard would work so many jobs to keep us alive, and one day I grew tired of watching him struggle while I sat at home with our son. So I turned to the Lord, and though it took some convincing, I eventually got Richard to come visit some local churches with me. We tried many and found this calloused mindset all around. It wasn't about God, no. It wasn't about salvation, no. It was about pride. Closing your eyes to the world around you and commanding a room full of people to hand over what little monetary value they had in order to get closer to what they believed to be God. We found nothing but sorrow here. Until we met someone. Someone who showed us a new path, a direct path, not only to salvation, but to a better understanding of the world here on this planet, on Earth, as well as the heavens above. The hellfire below. Now, some of you here know who I'm talking about. Some of you have been blessed by her. Some of you have felt her hand upon you. Some of you, like me, have even seen her yourself. I'm talking about Lilith. Lilith, who has given us everything. And for this blessing, we are called to give her everything we can. Sacrifice who you are, who you were, who you thought you were born to be, and give that up to Lilith. And in return, she will give that to God. And she will bless you with wonders beyond your comprehension. When my husband passed, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was alone with this teenage boy who didn't understand what was going on. But Lilith placed her hands on our son's shoulder and breathed new life into him. And I'm so happy to let you know, my wonderful flock, that our child, who had abandoned his faith, is finally coming home. Lilith spoke this into existence years ago, and it's finally time. Praise the Holy Mother. My son is coming home. Among the howling and hissing wild creatures and demons, Lilith herself, demoness of the night, will call this place her home, a place to recoup and rest between her devastating forays.
So, we learn quite a bit about the woman herself throughout that frankly sacrilegious sermon. Not the least of which is that the so-called Church of the Holy Mother is most definitely a cult, completely dedicated to the figure of Lilith. It seems that after the death of her husband, Diana proceeded to radicalize her teenage son, aka Dwayne. It's painfully clear that none of this is healthy whatsoever. I mean, Diana is quite obviously out of her mind, or was out of her mind. I'm not really sure if she's alive or dead in the present day. To be honest, this tape was a rare miss for me, so let's just move on. The 15th tape in this ongoing gem of an analog horror series is titled Jezebel 1997. I wonder what that means exactly. Well, let's just take a look at the definition of the term Jezebel, shall we? Jezebel is, in fact, a name. According to the Book of Kings in the Hebrew Bible, Jezebel was actually the daughter of the king of Israel himself. Interesting stuff. And with this title, we now have even more biblical and religious connections. And now on to the second section of the title, that 1997 part in particular. It appears as though we're going much farther into the future with this one, folks. Oh, and by the way, not that you really care, but I would have been just 7 years old in the year 1997. Shit, I'm old. Anyway, the tape opens with a beautiful shot of green trees and foliage, and it's in broad daylight for once. Well, I gotta say, that certainly makes for a nice change of pace. The tape begins with Dwayne, or whoever is holding the camera, hiking through a forest somewhere. Now, the question is this just a relaxing afternoon stroll through the trees? Or is Dwayne out in this forest for some other nefarious purpose? To be completely honest with you, I don't trust anyone involved with these tapes at this point. As whoever is holding the camera continues to trudge through the trees, we begin to hear the sound of what seems to be some kind of ghostly, ethereal choir. Just listen. Now, I highly doubt that there's actually a full choir singing out in those trees somewhere. So why are we hearing this rather haunting music then? Well, as we already know, within this series, every single little detail is significant. However, the noise of the birds in the trees is almost drowning out the voices of the choir as our camera person continues to trek through the forest. Eventually, our intrepid camera person arrives at an old-looking, run-down residence. I wonder who lives here. As the camera pans around the property, we continue to hear the choir. After a moment, though, the camera makes its way over to an old, broken-down shed. Following this, however, the screen goes dark. It appears it is now nighttime. As the camera slowly approaches a house, we receive the first text of this tape. "This is holy ground," it says. The camera then cuts to the interior of the broken down home. We see that debris is strewn everywhere. Not a very cozy looking place, really. It appears as though not a single soul has set foot in this house in potentially decades. In the following shot, we see a chandelier that seems to be moving all on its own. The camera then pans down to show a bouquet of flowers resting in a nearby chair. I can only assume that they're fake flowers because they look fresh as hell. The camera then shows a lit candle sitting upon a table. Did Dwayne light it himself, or was I wrong about my assumption that no one else had set foot in here in years? This question is seemingly answered when we receive text that reads, "Someone was here." The camera then cuts to a shot of a rug on a wooden floor. We then see a slightly open door that looks to lead to a bedroom of sorts. We see a chest of drawers and a bunk bed. Perhaps this was the children's room. As we're shown further images of the room, we're met with more text. "They are gone now," it reads. The camera then cuts to a shot of a heart-shaped picture frame with a photo of a couple inside it. However, it's too difficult to make out who exactly it is. Obviously, we're no longer in the rundown house, as this one has working electricity. Eventually, the camera zooms in on the photo, but I still don't recognize the couple. The screen then cuts to black with more text appearing, "But I'm still here," it says. And over a completely black screen, we begin to hear very odd sounds indeed. Listen. It seems to be singing or chanting of some sort. Could this be the possible return of our ethereal choir, perhaps? "I grant you eternal life," the text declares. We begin to see an ominous red image before the text continues with, "And in exchange, I shall have your skin." Well, that's a lovely image. Thanks for that. The camera then cuts back to the interior of a home, and we hear a woman crying out in obvious distress. However, there are also other crunching sounds that I don't even want to guess at, so just listen. It is nearly time, the text warns, and that brings us to the end of the tape. I have to say, this was one of the truly creepier entries so far. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up from beginning to end. I have many thoughts, of course, but I want to save my theories for the end of the series. We're almost at the finish line now, folks, so let's press on. Well, we've done it, folks. We're finally here. The end of the Mckinney family home videos. It's been a long time coming. I wasn't sure that we'd actually make it, but we did. I think that deserves a round of applause, don't you? After all, this series has been a truly terrifying and harrowing experience. And just look at that. Our final tape is also the very longest of the entire series, with it clocking in at over 15 minutes. Well, I guess we better get started then. It's time to find out what happened to the Mckinney family once and for all. And so, for the final time, let's dive back into the muck. The final tape opens with a black, static-filled screen before it cuts to Dwayne behind the camera, walking along an old, dead-end road. Dwayne hops the barrier and walks up to a small stream. With the way Dwayne is narrating events for the camera, I have to wonder, could this be more footage from our very first tape? The one where Dwayne was giving us a tour of the new house? The scene then cuts to a shot of a no trespassing sign, as Dwayne explains that they rarely get any solicitors there. The tour continues with a shot of a decrepit-looking old shed, and we're so early in the timeline that Dwayne hasn't even been inside of it yet. The screen then cuts to the rundown interior as Dwayne expresses his confusion over what the shed would even have been used for. He also mentions possibly renovating it at some point in the future. Yeah, we'll see. Our next shot is of a light bulb that Dwayne flips on, marveling at the fact that there is still electricity running to this old shed. Next, we move inside as the camera shows all of the accumulated junk. We see a Christmas wreath that's still hanging upon the wall. Dwayne even mentions grabbing it and hanging it in the house as a decoration. Could the wreath be haunted, perhaps? Or even demonic in some way? Could an old Christmas wreath really be the cause of all of the Mckinney's paranormal problems? On one hand, I say that in jest, but on the other, well, who knows? As Dwayne continues to explore the shed, he mentions that it looks as though someone left in a hurry, meaning the previous occupants of the home. The camera then cuts to a very dark shot. As smoke billows up in front of the camera, we see what seems to be a figure draped in all red robes. And set over this haunting image, we receive our first text of the tape. "The harvest is upon us," it reads. The camera then cuts to someone walking through the forest at night. The only sound is the crunch of their feet upon the leaves. As the person continues to walk, they eventually come upon another figure draped in all red. The camera stands still, just staring at this ominous figure for a while before we receive more text. "We have abandoned our tongues," it says, or at least that's what I think it says. As you can see, the word tongues is spelled very strangely, with the number 9 where the letter G should be. Or maybe that's just a wonky looking G, who knows. The camera then cuts to a shot of what looks to be a guardrail on the side of the road. And off in the darkness beyond, we can see yet another red-clad figure. Is this the cult of Lilith that we're seeing? The so-called Church of the Holy Mother? Over this shot, we see even more text. "We have given up our names," it informs us, before we hear what sounds like a scream, or perhaps even a howl. Here, listen for yourselves. The camera then cuts back to what looks to be the inside of the shed, and standing at the far end is a tall figure, draped in all black robes. The camera stares at this mysterious figure for a minute before we're hit with more text. "We relinquish our humanity," it reads. The screen then goes black before the words, "to you," appears. "And to her," the text continues. I'm assuming the her means Lilith, but who is the you? The camera then cuts to the outside at night, as whoever is holding it, presumably Dwayne, is walking up to a large white cross, and we see that the cross itself is also draped in red. That must be Lilith's favorite color or something. And over this image, we receive even more text that reads, "You are my loyal servant." Suddenly, we're given quite the jump scare as what looks to be the entire series we've seen so far begins flashing across the screen. The series sequence seems to be moving in backwards order, and over the flashing, distorted images we see the words, "Vengeance is yours." Eventually, the screen cuts to black, and we see the single word, "everything." The next shot is very dark, but we can see a fire off in the distance. Quite suddenly, superimposed over the fire, we see the image of a cross with a body hanging from it. Almost immediately, this is followed by more text. "Dry your tears," the text commands. The only thing we can hear is the sound of the fire popping. "You will be with me in paradise," the text promises. Following this, we cut to the front of the cross as it's being held up and supported by two large rocks. We can also see what looks to be blood streaming down it. We then cut to an image of a bloody body clad in all white, crucified upon that cross. And over this gruesome image, we receive more text. "Diana, my child," it says, "the harvest has begun." But out of nowhere, we cut back to Dwayne's tour of the property. Once again, he's in the shed. But as he's talking about how to get rid of all the old junk, he hears a noise and spins around.
But we'll definitely figure this out. But I definitely don't want to be in here longer than I have been, so let's go ahead and
Following this, we're back to an image of the cross, and we hear what sounds like the deep knell of a church bell. As we're hearing this, the bloody figure in white slowly turns around to face us. Could this be Lilith herself? Slowly, as the figure approaches the camera, we see that it has wings. As it's approaching, we begin to hear the sounds of a woman and a baby crying. And this seems to draw the figure's attention as it turns, revealing black wings and long blonde hair. In the background, we can barely make out the people draped all in red. Most likely the cult members themselves. The figure in white, possibly Lilith, then kneels down before the cross as though she's praying. And abruptly, we cut back to the property tour as Dwayne finds a videotape lying on the ground, and there appears to be dried blood all around it. Ominous stuff. We then cut back to the evil ceremony as the figure rises and turns, with its red-clad followers on either side. Horrifically, in its arms, the figure carries an infant. Text then appears that reads, "What will you name this child?" As the figure holds the baby, the camera zooms in. Slowly, it begins to walk forward. "She will love it," the text says. Suddenly, the camera cuts, and now we're running. And I don't even know how to describe this next shot, so I'm just going to show you. Their faces appear to be covered by the same kind of painting that we saw hanging on the wall in that previous tape. No idea what that means. The camera then cuts to a close-up shot of a wooden wall before we receive even more text. "Your child will know me," it reads. Horrifically, we then see an eyeball appear behind the hole in the wall, and it's wide open and looking around. "This was never your home," the text continues. And throughout this whole scene, we've been hearing some very unsettling sounds. The camera then cuts to a shot of bright daylight. We appear to be outside the Mckinney family home, and we can see a man walking in the distance. Could this be Dwayne himself? However, over this more idyllic shot, we continue to receive text. "It is your tomb," the words declare. And if that is Dwayne off in the distance, then I just gotta ask, who is filming? Jessica, perhaps? Suddenly, the camera cuts back to night, and we once again see the demonic white cross. Over this shot, a creepy kind of singing can be heard. And with the song still playing, we're treated to a close-up shot of Lilith's terrifying face as she slowly turns to face the camera. As the camera zooms in, the screen cuts to black, and we see the single word, miracle. Over a black screen, we then hear a high-pitched whine and distortion. And this brings us to the end of our final tape. Wow, that's all I can say. So, what to make of this incredible series? Well, to be honest, I'm not really sure. I do have some theories, though. So I believe that the spirits who have been communicating with us throughout this series are both the slain children and the previous occupants of the Mckinney family home. I believe that these people were sacrificed to Lilith by Diane before Dwayne and his family ever even moved there. However, after Dwayne hit a rough patch in his marriage, his mother reached out and convinced him to move closer to her. Dwayne agrees, and the family moves, looking for a fresh start. After arriving, Dwayne's mother begins pressuring the family to attend her local church, which we know is actually a demonic cult in disguise. Reluctantly, Dwayne agrees, and over time he becomes more and more indoctrinated into the cult. At this point, either Dwayne himself or the cult in general begins sacrificing people to the demon Lilith, which explains the missing people's posters from the early tapes. These were the cult's victims. Eventually, in the year 1993, the cult's influence over Dwayne would grow to such a point that he did the unthinkable. He sacrificed his own daughter to the cause. This would explain the tape in the forest where Dwayne hears a child crying out before he runs away. He wasn't running away in terror. He was running away in shame. This man literally watched his own daughter be sacrificed by the cult that he's a part of. Now, other people believe that the tape, which takes place at a school, is actually where Dwayne sacrifices yet another child to their awful cause. This time, one who is not his own. I don't know if this theory is true or not, but it certainly makes some sense. And if true, I believe that this is the very first time that Dwayne himself ever got his own hands dirty, so to speak. In the year 1995, there is a terrible fire. I don't know if it was purposefully set or was just an accident, but I and others believe that Dwayne's mother potentially lost her life in the blaze. Although I'm not really totally certain on that point. Following this, people have speculated that Jessica left the family, only to eventually return sometime later, and I believe that this fateful decision would cost her her life. All throughout this time, Dwayne is being tormented by the haunting voices of his victims, either real or imagined. And not too long after this, Dwayne comes face to face with Lilith for the first time. Now, I'm not positive if Lilith is actually real or just a product of Dwayne's tortured psyche, but it doesn't really matter in the end. To him, she's very real, in the same way that the voices he hears either actually exist or just a manifestation of his profound guilt. Now, some have speculated that Dwayne himself loses his life not much later on, but I'm not totally sure on that. After all, the final tape is a complete game changer. We actually witness a sacrifice being made, and the rise of the demon lord Lilith herself. So who exactly was sacrificed? Jessica? Dwayne's mother? I'm just not sure. Although I'm leaning towards Jessica, which means she didn't actually die back when she first went missing. But anyway, what do you think? My girlfriend actually has a completely different but very interesting theory, which involves time dilation, and the baby we see in the final tape actually being Dwayne himself. But I'm not going to go down that road, or we'll be here all day long. The truly great thing about the Mckinney family home videos is just how ambiguous it really is. This series allows for the viewer to come to their own conclusions. So let me know in the comments below exactly what you think really happened here, because I'd love to hear it.